Hi, everyone. This is a speech I gave on 22nd of April 2021 at the conference by Migrant Help. And the title of my talk is Visible, Invisible. You see me, you recognize me, you hear my voice. I'm not allowed to be a person. Thank you so much for the introductions. I feel privileged to be here to speak to you all today about our experiences of mental health while going through the UK asylum and immigration system. Why am I qualified to talk about this subject? I've been in the process of seeking asylum for 6 years now. I've had the privilege of being part of Coventry Asylum and Refugee Action Group, CALAG. CALAG is led by asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants living in the West Midlands. So today I'm speaking not only as someone personally affected, but also from the experience of many other people that we support and care for at CALAG. This is a poem by a refugee woman. It was actually published in the report by Women for Refugee Women at the beginning of 2020. The report is called Will I Ever Be Safe? You can search it online. So this woman, she was trying to express some of the difficult feelings about destitution, that she feels alone. It's entitled, She Feels Invisible. She is lost. She doesn't know where she is or where she is going. Everyone is walking past her, caught up in their own thoughts. Maybe she needs some money to go somewhere for help. Maybe she needs to buy food. She's hungry. When you are homeless, no one pays attention to you. They don't care. You feel invisible. Generally, when we think about poor mental health, we only think it is about what is going on in our heads. But for asylum seekers, it's not just about what is going on in the head. It's also about what happens in the society, how we are treated by the system and the society. With mental health, you can't really see what is going on. That's for everyone, not just asylum seekers, but for asylum seekers who are isolated, traumatized, and destitute, it just adds another layer, and that alone is a cause of mental health. You see us on the street, and we look like any other people, but we are not recognized as such. We are not free, and we live in fear and shame. We are not being seen. We are invisible. Imagine you are a person living inside a glass bottle. You can see what is going on outside, but you cannot feel the atmosphere. You cannot feel the wind because you're not in that atmosphere. Your experience is different from the person who is free. You are not someone who is not confined inside a bottle. You can see the trees swaying, but you can't feel the wind when you are inside a bottle. That is what being asylum seeker is. There are rights, but they don't apply to you. It is similar to window shopping for asylum seekers. It is window shopping. If you are a professional in your own country, for example, you were an engineer or a nurse, just like many asylum seekers are, when you see a job advert or even a call for volunteers for the NHS, you tell yourself, I can do this. I want this volunteer position. I want to help others. Oh, but I'm not allowed to do it. Then the window shopping continues for the asylum seeker. This contributes to the growing frustration and loneliness in our lives. Although we are humans, we are not treated as humans. We are invisible. Here is a quote by one of my friends who shared with me, and I quote, "I used to wash people's cars, people's toilets, and I've done all sorts of jobs for 8 years before I got my status. I'm now back in my professional job. But at the time, I felt that the button was switched off my professional career." Let us remind ourselves now of the 4D strategy that the Home Office uses on asylum seekers and migrants in this country. The first D of the 4D strategy is destitution. This is where we see asylum seekers having no right to work, depending on £35 a week from the government. Or if you were working, you are stopped from working. And we know that begging is illegal in this country. People are living in poverty, homelessness, starvation, and no health care. Mental health issues come up, and there's exploitation. The second D is detention. This is where you are locked up at some point to be removed if you survive destitution. We live in fear and anxiety, knowing that one day you would be locked up. If you're lucky, you're released from the detention, you're released back into the street, and you're required to go for reporting as if you're a criminal. You're put on bail. The third D is deportation. This is where you are removed back to what you are running away from, to our own countries. We live with that anxiety that one day we'll be sent back to our abusers. There's hardly any good and free legal advice available. And that is how we end up with problems, because we have to represent ourselves against well-paid and educated lawyers. The fourth and final D is death, as part of the 4D strategies that the Home Office uses. If you're destitute, you're bound to die. We see people committing suicide or dying in the streets as a result of destitution. There's a lot of suicides in detention centers. We have seen people being killed where they are being deported. The two famous cases, one of them is Mr. Jimmy Mubenga, who people in the plane reported that they could hear him say, "They are going to kill me. I can't breathe." And indeed, he was killed that day. The second one is Joy Gardiner, who was a student from Jamaica, and she had a baby in this country. They said, and it's reported online, that they put masking tape around her head and shuffled toilet papers in her mouth to suffocate her, and she collapsed and died. The final slide, it's just statistics, where it says asylum seekers are 5 times more likely to have poor mental health than the general public. Let me just stop share. So it's these 4 Ds that make us invisible. It is the reason that you are taken advantage of. People are stuck in relationships that are not working and they are being exploited. You are dehumanized. People are living in isolation with no family, no friends, suffering in silence, living in fear. fear of what happened at home, and fear of not having papers here, fear of deportation, fear as a result of trauma, witnessing violence. Although it happened in the past, the damage continues to play in our minds. Fear of returning to that trauma, that one day you will end up in the hands of your abusers. We carry around memories of abuse, violence, torture, rape, and pain. It plays up while we are awake and during sleep. Images keep flaring up all the time. When we collapse exhausted, we are declared mentally unfit. It would only be fair to say that all asylum seekers are mental health patients, and they get worse in the asylum system, and nobody cares. Even our families are turning against us because we have changed. So what are our day-to-day challenges where we are in the asylum system in this country? One, housing. We are seeing babies and mothers being moved into camps. The state of accommodation is unfit. It's filthy and overcrowded. We are seeing people being moved at night and not being told where they are going to, only to end up in barracks and to meet COVID outbreaks. Just the pain of seeing others suffering. Like there was a case of a 54-year-old blind man in Mponela camp at the time when someone was describing what he is going through. It just causes so much pain to people who are witnessing and even just hearing the story. And now we are hearing a lot about everybody in policy coming to an end, and we are seeing people being made homeless again. Surely we do not need Public Health England to come and tell us or to prove to us that sleeping rough is dangerous. This is a mental health violence amongst unhoused migrants. Right to a home is a human right issue. The second point is on health care. There's lack of access to health and well-being. NHS charges and data sharing prevents people from accessing health care, even when they are entitled to it. Women who are being charged £6,000 for giving birth, yet they are not allowed to work. And these women who are afraid to go to the hospital, they are putting themselves at risk as well as the risk to the unborn child. We are seeing people who have been sectioned into hospitals, and when they are discharged back into the streets. Why is that? And recently there was a buzz. The tabloids were buzzing about a COVID vaccine amnesty for undocumented people. Let us be clear, vaccines alone does not mean safety. The GPs are still asking for passports and proof of address, which is not necessary. It is not just COVID. All other conditions and mental health issues are left untreated because it's impossible to find a GP. Point number 3, food and clothing. People failed by the system are working to survive, just as we saw in the Leicester sweatshops. We get £5 a day from the government. It's not adequate for food, let alone for clothing. We have no choice on what to eat. We have nothing for fruits and vegetables. We often ask ourselves sometimes when we have an official event, for example, to say, what am I going to wear during this event? Then we have period poverty for women, which is humiliating, and it adds additional layer of shame and stress to women who are already suffering. We all here know the consequences of children growing under deprivation, with parents who are mentally unwell. We have young people who are being denied education and they can't also work. Some people are moving around with what they call Bell 201 with a condition. You cannot study. If you didn't have access to a solicitor to reverse that, people still believe the letters that they received, and therefore they cannot study. The last point I want to touch on our day-to-day struggles is a home office and the legal processes. People are still being asked to go and report during the pandemic. This has caused so much stress and suffering. People sometimes walk long distances to go to report because they have no transport. There is a call to abolish reporting as it doesn't save anyone. It is torture. We have people who have lived here 20 years plus. They should meet the long residence route, but if you've been homeless for 20 years, it's so hard to produce evidence for every year to prove that the last 20 years you've been here. There's also lack of legal advice to help people to sort out their status after spending so much time in poverty, and solicitors will need to be paid. If you're successful, you are given 30 months with no recourse to public fund conditions attached to it. So your priority is to get a job so that you can raise money for your next visa applications. I also want to touch on the pandemic of racism by the staff that work with asylum seekers in camps, in houses, and everywhere. The lack of legal advice and complexity of the system is also causing the stress to people. The uncertainty, especially to people who are traumatized and they have a language problem. Personally, moving to Coventry opened my eyes. This is where I came to realize how material and physical needs of people are not being met and the consequences of such treatment. I have seen friends sleeping in bad places, graveyards, old cars, and places like that, under bridges. Women being abused, sexually exploited because they cannot go to the police. I'll give you two experiences of some of the people that I know. The first one is Mada. Mada was my neighbor. She lived 4 or 5 houses away from where I lived when I lived in asylum accommodation. She suffered from stroke, which paralyzed her heavily and affected her speech so much. She was later diagnosed with dementia, but she was left to live alone because she was a refused asylum seeker. She could not get into supported housing despite the condition that she was in. One day, as she was trying to prepare a meal for herself, she caught fire and she died from the burns. May her soul rest in peace. Did we learn anything from that tragedy? No, we didn't. Because we still have people in same or similar situation as Mada. People who are still homeless, or sometimes they are looked after by charities, but that is random and it's not enough. The system is failing them. The second person I want to share with you his experiences is called Barito. I've just given the name Barito. Barito is a member of Kalag. He used to work at a local school here in Coventry as a supply science teacher when he still had visas. When his visas expired, he tried to renew, and doing appeals in the street, he eventually faced mental health issues, and he was sectioned and Briefly, he was given accommodation, but he was evicted again. He became so unwell and became medically blind, and mental health took a toll. He eventually got support from a mental health charity, which is keeping him. But as I said, this type of support is random. So this is the situation that many of our members are in Kalag. And Kalag has over 100 members, and it continues to grow. So what needs to be done? Because so many things here that are causing harm, making us die, live with mental health, and deteriorate. What needs to be done? I'll show you a short video. It's only about 3 minutes. Let me share my screen.
So what I'd like to begin with is sharing with you my understanding of what dignity means. I've really worked a lot on this, and it took me a while to come to an understanding of what it is. And after researching it for such a long time, I finally came to the conclusion that it's a very simple concept. And we don't want to complicate it either, because the simpler, the better, and everybody will understand what dignity means if the concept is simple. And so my understanding is that dignity is our inherent value and worth. Every single one of us, we all have dignity. We're born with it. It's part of who we are as a human being. And we all have inherent value and inherent worth. And in fact, I would even argue that we are not only valuable and worthy, but that we're invaluable, that we're priceless, and that we're irreplaceable. So my definition is really very simple, that our dignity is our inherent value and worth. And there's another piece to it, which is our dignity is also very vulnerable, and vulnerable to being harmed and injured. So yes, we have an inherent value and worth, but at the same time, it is so prone to being injured and wounded. And frankly, I think that's probably as equally as an important part of the definition as, you know, the first part of the equation. So another aspect of the definition, and really I think is important to clarify, is that I think dignity is very different from respect. I often, whenever I give a talk, I'll ask people just to tell me, what do you think dignity is? I just take, ideas from the audience. And inevitably, the first thing people say is respect. And oddly enough, if you pay attention to when you hear the word dignity, you'll hear it as if it's all one word, dignity and respect. This is just what people do, and they confuse it. And it's a problem because, as I said earlier, I think our dignity is, everybody has dignity. Every human being who's born on the planet has dignity. But with respect, I think respect is earned. So when you confuse those two things, especially in my field in international conflict, where people are clamoring, we want to be treated with respect. We must be treated with respect. But I think what they really want to say is, treat me with dignity. Treat me as a human being. Because, if you're in a conflict and you don't respect the other side, then you're going to have trouble getting that out of your opponent or your enemy. But if we make the claim that everybody deserves dignity, and what needs to happen here as part of the resolution process of these conflicts is to try to restore the dignity to the relationship, that's very different from demanding respect from people.
I love that. I love that video. And yeah, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, including refugees. But for Mada and Barito, who I just described, they were not treated with dignity. Let us have humanity. As we have seen from the pandemic, you will agree with me that the only way to make diseases disappear in society is not by suppressing the symptoms, but eliminating the cause and preventing it from happening again. Eliminating the cause of poor mental health in asylum seekers by fairer policies, not the 4Ds that we just discussed earlier. And it is all of us who need to do the work of working on fairness and to restore dignity. Injustice happens when we do not act in the face of injustice. We are asking Home Office to make decisions quicker. Some people have waited 3 years or more, and in some cases, it had to take the intervention of their Member of Parliament. The uncertainty of waiting for Home Office decisions adds to the stress. These decisions have to be good and fair. Support people to integrate meaningfully. Give them proper legal representation. No one here would want to face the state system alone with all the disadvantages and no legal advice. Most importantly, give people status, indefinite leave to remain, who are failed by the current asylum and immigration system. Refugees already have broken lives. Why want to punish them further? The pandemic has just added another layer of health risks and isolation amongst asylum seekers. People need right to work so we are able to feed ourselves, to pay for our own accommodation. I have a quote from a friend of mine again, who said, when you work, time flies. There's too much anxiety when you're just sitting around without doing anything. Work gives you an opportunity to form new networks to replace what you had before you came here. You learn new skills besides boosting the economy and paying tax. When you work, it changes the view of the citizens about you. Otherwise, you are bullied each time someone realizes that you are not allowed to work. Right to work is a key in our lives, end of quote. We are seeing adverts by the government where they are recruiting from overseas for positions of teachers, healthcare workers, etc. And yet, we have nurses and healthcare workers who are asylum seekers. They are considered invisible. Why not start with the people who are already here? This will include tax, we will pay for our own accommodation and food, because we are able-bodied people. There's also lack of specialist mental health support within the asylum system. We need more support for counseling to help us heal. Many asylum seekers want to volunteer because we know that helping others, it helps us to improve our emotional intelligence as well as our social well-being, and it tackles isolation. But if the organizations give to their paid staff transport, can that also be offered to volunteer asylum seekers? Let there be equality. Another dynamic that we need to be aware of as well is where we have an organization where all paid staff are white. all volunteers are Black and brown people. And the people that that organization serves are Black and brown people. The people that we are serving need to be reflected in the leadership of the organizations if we want to make meaningful interventions. Another thing that we are tired of is if people succeed and get their stay, in most cases, they continue to be regarded as volunteers, even if a job comes up in the same position that they are volunteering in. They're not given a paid job. That position goes to someone externally, a different person than the volunteer. That has to stop. We also want to be kept busy, but with meaningful activities such as access to education, professional development. We want to access to communities so that we can be seen and interact as human beings who can give back to the society that has accepted us. Sometimes when I ask some of my friends, how do you cope when the tough gets tougher? Some people mention prayer. So support us even in our own cultural beliefs, if that is what is making us stay stronger. We also expect respect from the people that work with us, council officials, solicitors, interpreters, everyone. Because we deserve respect. Another point that I want to also bring to your attention is not valuing our time. So where does mental health problems come from? They come from not being valued. And being disvalued comes in different forms. There is poverty that is forced on us, not feeling being listened to, not being acknowledged for the community work that we are doing, not being looked after. All these bring a negative impact on people. Who doesn't want to be valued? We all want to be valued, appreciated, and respected. If we were meeting face to face, I would have asked you to say, can you raise up your hand if you want to be treated like objects? We see families being destroyed when one person does not offer respect. All these things impact on our mental health and our families and our children. Because asylum seekers are not allowed to work, it does not mean that we cannot donate our time to the community. For example, I cannot be paid, but one way of valuing my time and what I do in my community would be to make a donation to CALAG to show appreciation for me and my time given to you, and that you value the work that I'm doing to my community. I think this is another area that we need to reflect on and change on how our contribution is recognized by organizations that have resources. I appreciate being a speaker, but my time is a resource for people who are in greater need. And being asked to go over our trauma becomes exploitative if there is no recognition that this is also hard emotional work. We also need compassion and empathy. Everyone can do that. You don't need a government policy or money or training to treat us as human beings. Let us also ask ourselves who is not in the Zoom and why. We are also asking for equality for everyone, including disabled asylum seekers or children of asylum seekers who are disabled. We also appreciate the support in terms of trainings, being recommended for funding and things like that. I believe leadership is not about positions. Leadership is about who you are. So we need to bring everyone on the table because we all need a seat at the table. We all have something to bring to that table. Let us work together. We also need space where we can breathe, we can focus, and just to hear our priorities. We ask people to connect with us from where we are. We want support that we need. There's a famous quote that I like, and I'll read it. You do not want to spend your life climbing up a ladder only to discover that it has been resting against a wrong mountain the entire time. End of quote. So what we want is, we don't want to focus on wrong things the entire time. And in the end, not use those things that we've been spending our time on. We want things that will save our passion and purpose. Let me also remind all of you that it is okay for us to speak in our language. Just provide us with interpreters. No language is better than the other. I can't tell you how racism affects our mental health. Not only individual racism, which we experience on the street or online, but systemic racism that limits our life opportunities because of who we are and where we come from. We appreciate self-care, going on holidays, relax, or even having peace just for a day to free ourselves from fear that we carry around. There's a lot of work that is being left to community groups now and small mental health charities instead of the government. It's too much work for the communities like ours. And it has even been harder during the pandemic. We are exhausted. The support that we provided to people includes food, clothing, shelter, laptops, phones, etc. Let us work as partners, meaningful partnerships. Close now. But I can't finish without touching on the new plan for immigration. I personally am opposing the plan because it is adversarial and it will affect vulnerable people, including children. People will not have legal justice. The Home Office is emphasizing enforcement and speed, But that's not what fairness means. We want permanent protection, not just 30 months. Above all, what we want is justice, an opportunity to continue living our lives. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll leave you with this 2-minute video. It is a short clip based on a true story where together we won the battle to stop imprisoning migrant children against all odds. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy.
Right, everyone, quiet. Come on, bring it down. Quiet! All right, everybody, thanks for coming. We wanted to bring you all here because something's been happening and it's not right and we need to do something about it. This is Rosa. She's an Iraqi Kurd, but she's all right.
Okay, first, thank you all for being here.
Going to speak up, Hen?
Sorry. Thank you all for being here. We just wanted to say that what this government behaves is doing wrong.
Eh?
The Dawn Reds. The Home Office is taking asylum-seeking families from home and deporting them.
And they're not doing it fast enough.
We know that some people around here think it better that we hadn't come, but my uncles and grandfather were shot by regime in Iraq. My family, we came here because my father's life was in danger. He was teacher, but here he cannot work.
I have a question. Do you think anyone should be allowed to come and live here?
If they live in trouble, yes.
What if they're a criminal?
Yes, also then.
A murderer? A rapist?
Well, no.
No, okay, so we're all agreed. I mean, we can't just have an indiscriminate open border. We need rules and regulations. We need people to manage those rules, to man our borders.
We're not talking about murderers, criminals, or rapists. We're talking about kids here. We're talking about students at my school.
I understand that, Ewan. So what you're saying is people with kids should be allowed to stay, so long as they're no criminals?
No, you don't understand. It's more complicated than that.
And what about folk having wains just so they can get a passport? What will that lead to? Happy families? I don't think so.
My family are good people, and so are Agnes's. We fled for fear of our lives.
Look, you shouldn't be able to come into someone's house in the middle of the night and drag them away. It's wrong.
Well, what time of day should they come then, darling? Should they make a wee convenient appointment that fits their schedule? Listen, I like you girls, but you're so naive, it's a joke.
Maybe it was naive to think that people will want to help us. But that's what you do, isn't it? When you're scared, you ask for help. But we're scared. We're scared because the Home Office is coming in the middle of the night to take people like us away. We're scared because if we get sent back to where we come from, we don't know what will happen to us. We're scared because every day we go to school and we say goodbye to our friends. We don't know if it will be for the last time. We're a part of this community too. And we need your help because we're under attack and we need your help because we can't defend ourselves alone.